Welcome to Unspun, unraveling the threads of cult recovery, one thread at a time.
I'm Alisa.
And I'm Jaya.
And we're two friends and fellow cult survivors creating the resource we wished we'd had when we were leaving our cult.
This is a safe, warm and welcoming space for those rebuilding their lives after leaving cults or high-control groups.
It's a serious topic treated with the levity and humour needed to heal and thrive.
We will be discussing sensitive subjects, so please prioritise your well-being while listening.
Now let's get started, pull up a seat and let's start unravelling the threads of recovery together. Welcome back to Unspun. Well, we did it! We've released our first episodes and honestly, we couldn't think of a better time to pause and reflect. When we first started this podcast, we had a simple hope to create a space where people with lived experience of high control groups and coercive relationships could share their stories with honesty, compassion, and without sensationalism. What we didn't expect was just how much these conversations would shape us too.
Over the past 10 episodes, we've had the privilege of hearing incredible stories of courage, loss, resilience, and recovery. We've laughed, cried, been challenged, and found ourselves thinking about these conversations long after the microphones were turned off. One thing that's become really clear is that no two stories are the same, but there are threads that run through them all.
Yeah. Today we're stepping away from interviewing guests and instead having a conversation with each other. We'll be reflecting on what it's been like to be first-time podcasters, what we've learned about recovery, why these stories matter, and some of the patterns we've noticed across our guests' experiences. Recovery, we've discovered, isn't simply about leaving a group. It's about rebuilding trust, recovering, rediscovering identity, learning to live with uncertainty, finding our voice again, and slowly coming home to it yourself. So grab a cup of tea, settle in and join us as we look back on our first episodes. This will be our first episode on YouTube. If you want to catch our earlier pods, look for Unspun on all the platforms. So today we're going to be asking each other questions and Jaya will kick us off.
So when we first started Unspun, what were we hoping it would become?
Well, for me, I was wanting it to become an evergreen resource for people who are leaving high control groups, cults, or experiencing like religious trauma. And I think that, we're making a really strong start in that direction. And the feedback's been pretty awesome about those like participating in the podcast and also those listening so far. Do you think?
Yeah, the response has been really great and people really understand what we're doing. It feels that we're providing a podcast that is a little bit different from all the rest.
Yeah.
Because we're so focused on recovery and I think the survivors most of all appreciate that.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, for sure. Jaya has been making the podcast what you expected.
No, I have done a few podcasts in the past and everyone is different.
Right.
Yeah, it's I didn't expect it to be so moving. It's listening to people's stories. They can be quite emotionally affecting. So when you come out of a podcast, it's a nice feeling, and you've wrapped up another podcast and you thank the guest, but quite often there's a bit in your heart where you feel for them, and it can be quite emotional sometimes.
Yeah, I would totally agree. That's what I didn't expect either. And I think the empowering nature of hearing those stories, but also for the guests, like that's the feedback we've been getting, that it's quite an empowering process, which has surprised me.
And is that something that you've enjoyed most about becoming a podcaster, is empowering the guests?
Yeah, particularly with this podcast, for sure, definitely. Yeah. What's been harder than you imagined?
Finding a diversity of guests. We were overwhelmed with ex-Jehovah's Witnesses. They seem to be prolific, certainly in this area.
Yeah.
But it's been finding people that are along their healing journey enough that they've had time to process it and they understand it and they can explain it. And a lot of people that we come across who we might like to have on the podcast who want to be on the podcast maybe aren't ready because they're still processing a lot. and they're still sort of going through that healing process. So, that's been quite hard to find the right candidates, because we really need people who've been through it a little bit and understand what they've been through.
Yeah, and they've got kind of really good, we need people who have good insight into their recovery and kind of how they got there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's been interesting because we've aired 10 episodes and we've got a lot more in the bag. But, it seems that there are themes that keep appearing, throughout all these episodes. And maybe you can talk through some of those themes that have popped up.
Yeah, I think the themes that I'm hearing are, I guess what struck me is around deconstruction. I didn't really have a strong perception or strong idea about deconstruction and how much of an importance that plays in your recovery journey. And I think, in particular, I think it's one of the most important things for survivors of high control and cult groups. So that's one theme that's come across. I think the other theme too is, depending on whether you were born into a cult or whether you joined one, the experiences are not different, but there's a different, I don't know quite how to say it. When you're born into a cult and it's all you know, the experience of leaving the journey is long and difficult, and it's such I think because you're raised in it, it's embedded in you in such a deep way.
Yeah.
Whereas if you join as an adult, you have an experience of what life was like before the cult. So I believe it's easier to go back than to leave if you were born into it. That was another thing.
Well, yeah, we were both born into cults, and I was, I'm 51 now, and I'm still unraveling behaviors and memories and all kinds of things that I've learned, that I picked up as growing up in a cult, and I'm still learning to shed those today. It's surprising that even, things come up.
Yeah.
And
agreed.
Yeah. I've been surprised by a lot of things about people's journeys, and some of the threads and themes that keep coming up. And one of them that surprised me was that a lot of leavers don't want to leave their spirituality behind.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah.
And quite often they are searching for something else, and they'll go to another church, or they'll look into some Eastern philosophy, and I was surprised by that, because for me, the last thing I wanted when I left Falun Gong in 2012, the last thing I wanted was to have anything to do with the cult or anyone or any other religion.
Yeah.
And I just sort of, it wasn't that I threw the baby out with the bathwater. I just didn't believe in
you threw the baby
anymore.
And the bathwater out.
No, I didn't believe. And to this day, I'm very skeptical about anything religious or spiritual. I'm very cautious, but I don't judge others for having those beliefs, but it was just something that surprised me. And the other thing that surprised me was, because Falun Gong has quite anti-homo, very homophobic and some racist qualities to the cult. And, I sort of, when I left, I left all of that behind. I didn't carry that on. I didn't sort of continue that homophobic view, because it was never really a part of me.
Yeah.
But I found that some survivors who come out, especially those who were born into cults, have a much more stronger feeling about things like homophobia and things like that. They still sort of hold onto those beliefs, which, is in a way quite shocking, but in another way, it's completely understandable. And again, I think we just have to remember that's part of their journey, and it's not necessarily where they'll end up. Like they might not necessarily stay like that.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of yeah, with Uncult and the podcast, you and I have to be able to be non-judgmental and compassionate to people whilst holding similar or different viewpoints,
Yeah,
conflicting viewpoints. And that's,
yeah.
that's been a surprise to me.
Right, yeah, sure.
I
To
mean,
your earlier point about people leaving and not wanting to leave their spirituality behind, like for me, when I left, I immediately jumped into something different. So I kind of went cult hopping for a while. I wanted something to replace because I think when you leave this whole system that sets your life up. And I'm like, but I need something to help me or to guide me. And it helped me to feel not so lost.
mm-hmm.
But the danger, I think, in that is that you make yourself vulnerable to just go to another cult. Yeah.
Yeah,
So I
yeah,
guess I
yeah. I
can
mean,
understand the need. Yeah.
totally. I went cult hopping after I left home, and that's how I
Mm.
ended up in Falun Gong.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was, luckily, the cults I were involved in, I didn't get too heavily involved in, and the cult I was born in was not as destructive as Falun Gong.
Yeah.
The Falun Gong was very destructive and very extreme, and sort of
Yes.
changed my view on everything.
Yeah. You'd
And
kind of
talking
had
about,
your fill by then, is that right?
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
talking about, having your perspective change. Has any of the guests that we've had completely changed your perspective or informed your perspective on
I
how
I don't
leaving a cult is?
I don't think I've had my perspectives completely changed, but I think it's helped me clarify or understand the process a bit better or how people react to leaving and what they do to help themselves kind of re-find or sometimes finds their own voice. Jonas was one of the people we interviewed that helped me clarify the activism around being in a cult or
Yeah.
protesting cults, especially with his perspectives on it being a human rights issue. Like for me, that helped me understand that it's not necessarily about all the sensationalist, terrible, ghastly things that happen, but more about people's ability to determine their own future, to get
Mm-hmm.
education, to have a right to earn their own money, those kind of things. And I think
Mm-hmm.
when we bring the arguments back to human rights, it enables religions, spiritual organizations to exist, but with the goal of enabling people to have their rights. That
Yeah,
was big for me.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Mm. Have these conversations changed the way you understand your own experience?
Yeah, absolutely. They quite often spark off memories, and you relate your own experience to
Yeah.
anyone you're interviewing. So, if they talk about a situation that's happened to them and it's happened to you, you sort of compare and contrast and sort of say, oh, was that the same for me? How was it different?
Yes. Yeah.
I think, I wouldn't say changed as in like a sea change or like a massive change, but it
Yeah.
certainly given me a much more broader perspective on my own situation. And
Yeah.
I find that as I go along, the more nuanced and complex it gets. There's so much to it. And
Yeah.
I mean, for me, I think one of the biggest realizations, I think, going through this whole process is that recovery really is a lifelong journey.
Yeah.
Especially
Definitely.
if you've been born into a cult,
Mm-hmm.
it's a lifelong journey of recovery. But even if you've just been in a cult for a few years, the damage looks the same to me.
Yeah.
We'll have 8 people around the table, and some have just left a cult, and some left a cult 30 years ago, and yet everyone's still talking about the same thing, about the same
Yeah.
problems, about coercive control, about shame, anger, about guilt, all of these emotions that you experience when you come out. And, that's very interesting.
Yeah, I found that too. And what I really was powerful for me, we also run a support group. So that's why we're talking about the group. But yeah, what was powerful for me in the group was that, I'd be sharing my story and there'd be people in the room from, so many different and varied groups. And they'd be all nodding their heads in agreement, like they knew what I was saying and I know what they are saying. And that's pretty incredible. Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of the most valuable parts of gathering face to face. And there's something about the energy in the room when everyone realizes they're in a safe space and they're not going to be judged and they can just say what they want to say and people will understand. They don't have to explain it. People just get it. And I think just that aspect in itself alone is such a relief for people.
Isn't it? Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah, and it's something, I mean, sure, you can get it online and online groups, but I feel like it's much better in person.
Yeah.
Where you can get all the feels.
Absolutely.
So to you, Alisa, what do you think recovery actually is?
That's such a big question. I'm not 100% sure how to answer that. I guess it's a process, and I'm not too sure about the term recovery. I don't know if I like it or not, but it's the word we've got, I guess. Like, it's probably more. A better word is probably discovery. Like, we're discovering new stuff all the time about ourselves, and as we look back, we're discovering new angles of our journey. And so the other thing, I guess, is it's not linear. We can feel like we're progressing and feel really free of the experience sometimes. And then, something will happen during our day and you'll go, I'm right back to that small person who doesn't have a voice. And that can be really upsetting.
I suppose also recovery suggests that you had a life outside of a cult before. So
exactly, yeah.
If you were born into a cult, recovering what exactly?
Yeah.
What are you recovering?
Yeah.
But I think it means more in terms of recovering your humanity.
Yeah.
I think that's what it means. Perhaps healing journey is a better is a better way to say it. But recovery does mean different things to different people, because of their various experiences.
I think it's the closest kind of term we've got, and I'm I studied anthropology, so language means a lot to me. But
language is very important.
It is, so I think recovery, the word is really good. People understand it. It's very clear. It's a clear concept, and a lot of people from other areas, like addiction, understand that language. But it's a process for sure.
It is a long process.
Yeah. Before we started the podcast, what did you think that recovery looked like? Has that changed, do you think?
Well, I went through, I think it's different for different people, but my experience was that it was very traumatic. It was traumatizing to go through therapy, traumatizing to realize that I had been in a cult. And you suddenly have all of these sort of cascade of feelings.
Yeah.
Anger that you've missed out on life, that you're behind your peers, that you've been duped, that your health isn't any good.
Yeah.
Perhaps your relationship isn't as good as it should be with your partner. So all of that stuff is really, really heavy stuff. And quite often you're going through all of it at once.
Yeah. It's like shit.
That is what recovery looked like for me, but it's not necessarily like that for everyone.
Yeah.
I think the answer is recovery looks different for every person, although there are similar threads going through. And I think, talking about similar threads, as I find that people get stuck in the weeds about determining what a cult is, for example.
Yeah.
But, it's easy to define when you look at it through the lens of coercion and control.
Yeah.
So you don't have to sort of mark off a checklist of things that make it a cult or not.
Yeah.
If there's coercion and control, then that's enough. You know, you don't have to name it a cult if you don't want to, but if there's coercion and control in the group that you're in, then that's enough to, to make you want to leave. And, that looks different for everyone.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
What about you? Going through this process, we've talked to various cult leavers, and is there one thing that you've learned about healing that you didn't know before?
Good question. Hard question. I don't know. I guess because I'm a therapist, I have a pretty broad knowledge about that sort of thing. I think what is new, and I did know this before, but it's been put more sharply into focus, was the ability of creativity to play a huge role in recovery. Like we've had musicians, we've had comedians, we've had artists, all sorts of people doing really creative things. And it's been so crucial for their recovery to be able to, I guess, find that sense of flow and something that's so absorbing that helps you to step outside of yourself, but also give you a sense of achievement and individuality.
Yeah.
That's been new, is realizing the depth or the power of creativity to create change.
Yeah. I've definitely noticed that especially in survivors that have an artistic outlet of some kind.
Yeah.
To me, they seem to deal with it better.
Yeah.
Their process is, not saying it's not any harder or difficult, but they do seem to handle the situation better, and they seem to be doing better. Those with a creative outlet, whether it be a comedian or music or art or whatever it is.
Filmmaking. There's so much you can do with creativity. Yeah.
Yeah. I think, going back to what we were talking about, about the word recovery, recovery isn't just about leaving, it's about rebuilding.
Yeah.
Have you noticed that?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that kind of discovering things that you're really passionate about, like creativity, I think that's one of the key things that I believe helps people recover. Yeah. Something you can really sink yourself into that you identify with. Because we're both artists too. So we both kind of know that on a really deep level
absolutely.
as well. Yeah.
Yeah, no, my art is my salvation. It keeps me going when I'm at a lack of what to do with myself. I can just focus on my art for a while.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like meditation.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
And it's also at the beginning of my healing process. I did a lot of art around my therapy. It's very specific to my therapy. Art sort of depicting the therapy tools and, safe spaces and all these tools. So I took all of these tools to help remind me to use them. And so I made them into a piece of art. And so I look at that art and okay, this is the tool that I need for this situation.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that came up in my recovery and my therapy was, one of the biggest things going in actually was identity.
Absolutely.
I wanted to know what was Falun Gong, what was cult, and what was me. And because cults had been part of my life almost all of my life, I just I know where to start. And I was going to ask you, why do you think that that's a thing that comes up in nearly every conversation we have with survivors? Is why do you think identity is so important as a topic?
Because when you're in a place of coercive control or in a cult, you lose your identity. Like the sole purpose of a cult or a coercive group is that you function as a group. There's no room for individuality. The group needs you to lose your identity in order for it to reach its objectives. So it's not encouraged, it's actually discouraged. And when you start to push back or when you have different ideas, that's when the control really starts.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So identity is just that, it's huge in terms of being able to build your own life, being able to have your own voice and agency, and being able to determine your future. Yeah, it's massive.
Yeah. Identity is pretty much core in anyone's healing journey.
Yeah. What do you think gives people hope?
Well, I think things like the group, like the support group, really give people hope.
Yeah.
When they go there and they're quite surprised, oh, look, there's lots of other people here, and wow, they're and they get to see people are at different stages in the journey, and they can see people that have really, really, like, I'm thinking of people like Royden Gibbs, who we interviewed. He's an ex-JW, but he's come a long way and is really wise and understands the dynamics and the process and everything very well. And he's an ex-JW. So I think of people like Royden, and he doesn't need the group, as it were, to help himself, but he comes to the group to support others.
He's kind of there.
Yeah, he's there to support others, and that's what we want. We want a range of people, a range of experiences, so that when new people come, they can see that. That there's just not one story to the healing process. There's not one way out of this. There's not like a 12-step program that you follow.
Yeah. Exactly.
It's really, really different. It's really, really unique for everyone. So I think when people get in that room and they see other people's journeys, and the group's a very happy place. That's one of the things I like about it. It's, we have a laugh sometimes. It's a very warm and accepting place. And I think when you come into that and you're not being judged or questioned or, why didn't you leave sooner? Why blah, 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 all those stupid questions you get asked. So I think that gives people hope,
Yeah, I agree.
Really do.
In the group, you can see people at different stages of their kind of leaving process. Like you say, we've got people who have been out for 30 years, we've got people who've been out for a year, and you get to see, I guess, all the stages, and people who are going through therapy, and people, are meeting new partners, and you're seeing their life expand and grow. Yeah, that's a great answer. Yeah.
That's a great thing, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think, I think it's an essential part of the healing journey, meeting others like you and knowing that you're not alone.
Yeah.
And I suppose that's why survivor stories matter, like what we're doing.
Yeah.
Having a resource where people who are leaving, they can come in and they go, oh, there's someone from this cult. I'm interested in hearing what their story is.
Yeah.
Oh, that's similar to mine. And then they listen to a few others. For you, Alisa, why do you think survivor stories matter?
I think they're hugely important. I guess, like for me, whenever I've been going through a hard time, I used to just search people's stories online or get books and read about other people's stories. A, because I don't feel so alone in my own kind of anguish when I know someone else has been through the same thing. B, because I can learn tips of strategies that worked, that help people, so that then I can try them as well. Is telling your own story is so empowering. There's something about speaking it out into the world that enables you to learn new things about your story or gain new perspectives, which I think has been surprising around the podcast as well. But yeah, I think survivor stories, especially in the cultosphere space, is maybe new in the way that we're doing it, because our focus is on what helped you, not the horrible, disgusting things that happened to you.
Yeah, and I think that's somewhat of a relief to a lot of people when we're talking about it.
Yeah, we're survivor focused.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What happens, do you think, Jaya, when people finally have the opportunity to still tell their stories? What have you noticed?
Well, sometimes it involves tears,
Yeah.
And it's usually of relief. or happiness. Someone will, be telling their story and the tears will start coming down, and everyone just gives them the space and time to work through those emotions.
Yeah.
And I think that is such a relief for people. I think that's a huge thing. I think a lot of weight is taken off their shoulders. I know that from my own personal experience, when I first told my story publicly, I broke down and cried in front of a whole crowd of people I didn't know. And but afterwards, I felt incredibly light. I felt free. I felt, unburdened in some way.
Liberated.
Yeah, liberated. So, I think survivors telling their story is really important, not just for other survivors, but just for themselves. I think it's actually part of the healing process.
Yeah, I think it can be for sure.
And I think telling the story, it's very empowering. Finally, they're being listened to, whereas in the cult, you couldn't question anything. You couldn't really be honest. You couldn't really be yourself. You had to be this cult identity. So yeah, I think there's just a huge amount of relief. And I think it's important that people listen to their stories. The survivors want to be heard, and it's not an intention seeking kind of thing.
Yeah,
like I say, it's part, like telling your story is part of your process. And as you tell your story, you get better at remembering things. You sort of, when you when you first start telling your story, you jump all over the place. And then as you tell your story more and more, you sort of gather a timeline of things that happened and what led up to this, and and you sort of get a better understanding of your own story and what happened. And that is really important, and it helps bring up repressed memories. Even if they're unpleasant, it's important that you remember them. I think, there will come a time when, and I hope that time is, soon, when accountability is going to be seen in courts for control and coercion. I think we're very close to that now. And so getting those stories right in your head is very important, because, soon they're going to be told in courts and whatnot in front of the law. And being confident in telling your story is really important.
Absolutely, yeah. What responsibilities do we have when people trust us with our stories in terms of the podcast?
We have so much responsibility. I feel like it's a very delicate scenario. We've got to be sort of not hand-holding, but being an ally.
And creating a space that feels safe and comfortable.
Yeah, and being an ally and just giving them the space to think about things, not hurrying them, not forcing questions on them, not trying to pull out juicy details. It's really just to let them tell their story in the most authentic way. And sometimes we have to, they'll have told us some stuff outside of the podcast, and sometimes we need to remind them, what about that story that you told me? So, we have some sort of guardianship over making sure that they don't forget things, and they tell their whole story at the right time. So there's, it's a huge responsibility.
It is, and sometimes people will have their story and you can I think I can just see in their kind of expression how intense that was. Not necessarily intense in a bad way, but it's kind of like I always offer to give them a call the next day and kind of debrief the conversation and just check in to make sure they're doing okay, because you can feel quite vulnerable after sharing your story, but kind of without, everyone I've rang back has really valued the process of coming on the podcast. I haven't had any. Yeah.
It's the same with the group. Like when we have, a heavy session, if you want to call it that, there's maybe, there's some tears or there's just some big realizations, and you can tell that in the room. I always remind people just to look after themselves for the next couple of days, that stuff might come out, stuff might come up.
Yeah.
And to be especially so we get couples quite a lot, who've left a cult together, and I always say just be kind to each other. You're both going to be in a sensitive state. Just be gentle and have some compassion.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, we have a duty of care.
For
We have a lot of responsibility. Yeah. So I suppose it's time to start talking about looking ahead in terms of the podcast.
Yeah.
After 10 episodes, where do you hope Unspun goes next?
I think I'm really happy just doing people's stories, but I'd also like to do some conversation on some maybe more specialized topics. We've got one coming up, and I think we'll be discussing interesting things like desire and how that's kind of squashed in a cult and how you can regain that. Yeah, so maybe like looking at things in a bit of a narrower lens. I find it really difficult to say that word all of a sudden, but yeah.
Yeah, we had that great session with Dr. Caroline Ansley, who came to the group and explained to everyone how the health system works. And there was lots of interesting insights into that.
Absolutely.
And it was totally focused on recovery and healing, and I think that might be a good topic to have for an episode, is maybe get her on and re-talk about that session she gave us in the group.
Yeah, I think that would be awesome.
Yeah, I think that'd be really cool. I mean, that's a topic I'm interested to explore, is to talk about health professionals and recovery.
Yeah, that'll be great. What conversations do you think are still missing or that we haven't covered yet?
I think there's just so many cults out there. I feel like I've been shocked at the amount of cults that have come along that I've never heard of.
Same.
Yeah.
We're just ripe for new ones, our world right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Everyone's looking for somewhere to belong. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the conversations that are missing are other cults that are very quiet and haven't really had any sort of publicity or whatever. I mean, whenever we say cult in New Zealand, the first thing people think about is Gloria Vale.
Yeah.
And Gloria Vale is not a typical cult, if you like. It's quite unique as far as cults go in New Zealand.
Yes.
Cults look a lot different than that. And I think the conversation that's really missing is that we need to stop trying to define cults by it's got a charismatic leader and it's got this and it's got that and therefore it's a cult. And I'm like, well,
approach.
Yeah, like I think that's irrelevant now, and we've got this, developing law framework around coercion and control, and that's I feel that's what the conversation should be about. Is this group or organization exacting coercion and control?
Right.
If yes, then something needs to be done about it. We don't have to call it a cult. We can call it a high demand group or whatever, whatever makes people feel comfortable. But the point is that we want more people to know, that if they're in any sort of group, marketing group, business, family, these
self-development,
these
that's a goodie.
Yeah, self-help, wellness.
Yeah.
They can all be cults. And so stop, I want people to stop sort of looking around and going, oh, here's the checkbox. Does my organization ticking all these boxes? All you have to say to yourself is that, am I being coerced in any way? Are my thoughts being controlled, or is my life being controlled? Then you're most likely in a cult or high demand situation, and you deserve to get out of there. So I think that's a massive public conversation that needs to be had on a society-wide level.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's what I think's missing.
Yeah. Well, we're kind of coming to a bit more of a close. Should we do some rapid fire? I always love a good rapid fire questions.
Okay.
One episode that really stayed with you.
Oh, it's definitely Rusty's.
Yeah.
he felt, he's like, oh, I've never been asked questions like this before. And he really thought about his answers, and his story is so fascinating, and he's a really funny guy.
He is, isn't he?
So I really enjoyed that. What about
Biggest
you?
surprise?
Biggest surprise? What about you?
I don't know. Jonas stayed with me because it was just an interesting experience, because I saw his comedy show the night before, and then we caught up at my house, and his story, and he got upset about his goats, and it just really... And then we went out for lunch afterwards, so I guess that story really stayed with me. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's your biggest surprise. This is rapid fire. Being rapid.
Sorry?
You're not being rapid.
Sorry.
We're running out of time.
I can't think of a biggest surprise. What about you? What was your biggest challenge?
My biggest challenge has been the technical aspect of running a podcast. That's hard.
For sure.
What's your favorite moment? My
favorite moment was probably not from the podcast, but from the group, when one of the survivors was crying, and she said, "Oh no, I'm not crying because I'm upset. I'm crying because I'm happy." And she gave me a big hug, and that was really nice.
Oh, that's lovely.
What about you? Something you changed your mind about?
Oh, what have I changed my mind about? I don't think I've changed my mind about... No, I don't think I've changed my mind about anything. Yeah.
What about one word that describes recovery?
Fluid. What about for you?
Healing.
Yeah, that's nice. One thing you've learned about yourself?
The healing's never over. For me, it feels like it's going to last forever. That's what I learned. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
What is one thing you hope listeners take away from our podcast?
I just hope listeners know they're not on their own in this journey, and there's resources out there to help and support you. Yeah.
One of the things we ask our podcasters, our interviewees at the end is, if you could say something to your former self just after you'd come out, what would you say? And the answers are very similar.
Aren't they? Yeah.
And one of them is
hang in there. You're doing an amazing job. Hang in there.
You've got this. But I think one of the ones is be kind to yourself.
Yeah, be compassionate.
And I think that was, I think that's really important. Yeah. I mean, looking back over these first 10 episodes, one thing that's become really clear is that recovery doesn't follow a straight line. It's messy, deeply personal, and different for everyone.
Yeah. But if there's one thing all of our guests have shown us, is that healing's possible, not because life becomes perfect, but because people slowly begin to reconnect with themselves, and they're building meaningful relationships, and they create lives that feel authentic to them.
Yeah. We also should say a big thank you to everyone who's listened, shared an episode, left a review, or trusted enough to tell your story. This podcast exists because of you. And I would also say thank you to Decult for being incredibly supportive.
For all of their amazing support.
Yeah, I'm really grateful for that. Yeah.
You're our inspiration. For sure. Yeah, and I guess we're really excited about what's coming next. We're going to continue to bring survivor stories, conversations with different people about different aspects of recovery, identity, relationships, coercive control, and what it really means to reclaim your life. Yeah. If today's conversation has resonated with you, we'd love you to follow Unspun on this channel and on the podcast platforms. Leaving us a review would be amazing. I don't know if we've got one yet, but we'd love to have one, especially a good one. Share this podcast with someone who might need to hear these stories. Thanks for joining us. Yeah. Until next time,
keep asking the questions,
keep untangling the threads,
and keep finding your way back to yourself.
Bye for now.
Bye.
Bye.